Holy cow. Conference play is among us and the madness has already arrived. Welcome into another episode of Six Rotations. Mick Haley, Daniel Gilman. So happy that you're with us again. Honestly, the reaction, Mick, from our bonus episode late last week of our Liberos was overwhelming. We love you guys. We thank you so much for the support and the kind words. Just, happy that we can chat with some of the best. Unfortunately, maybe a little bit of a jinx there on 2 and 3, as we've got a crazy shakeup in the top 5 teams that have never been as high as they are now. 3 of them in the top 5. A little teaser there. 3 teams in the top 5, their highest ranking of all time. We'll get to that in just a minute. But as always, sponsored by SNA Sports, better equipment for a better game. And Mick, wow, from the middle of the week and seeing Utah come out with their hair on fire and completely coming back to storm off and defeat Washington in 5 sets for the turnaround of them getting swept to Colorado. And that was just the beginning. Wednesday night was phenomenal. We highlighted a great Pac-12 slate. Before we get to this top 25, Friday night might have been the best night of volleyball in the last, 2 years? It was just so much fun to watch Maryland take down Wisconsin at the same time that Purdue and Ohio State was dueling. And then over across, you see Colorado taking down a team that has been so up and down in Utah. What was your biggest takeaway from can't forget Minnesota, right? And Michigan going 5. It was like March Madness, bang, bang, bang. Every single match was a fun one.
Yeah, except for one thing. Points were being scored by errors in almost all those matches, and defense wins. So the teams that really played the best defense, and I have to say this, Daniel, I would recommend, and I don't know how you feel about this, but I would recommend anybody to go back and watch the Wisconsin-Maryland game, because Maryland pulled more balls out of the air.
It was incredible. I actually watched it this morning because I don't have BTN Plus. I know I need to get it, but I'm watching the Ohio State Purdue match and I'm like getting updates from different people about the block fest going on. And we have to address it, right? Can we get just a memorandum to all of the broadcasters around the country to not say the word spike? Because how many times was spike spoken by the Maryland broadcaster? And it was infuriating.
Well, there are some things about the broadcasting. We could do a whole show on that. But honestly, I thought that Maryland showed all teams that if they can bring the ball up, maybe not even with technique, but bring it up as many times as they brought it up, and the saves were phenomenal. It just seemed to take the air out of Wisconsin. And I've never seen them so, I don't want to say lackadaisical, but lack of energy. I just thought they just wore them out by constantly bringing the ball back. And really, that's the nature of the game right now. Those that play defense are going to move up in the poll.
I'm going to go ahead and disagree with that phrasing. I think Wisconsin had a fire under them. I've never seen Dana Rettke as frustrated. When it was 24-23 in the first set, and there was a call that was a touch, but it wasn't called until after, and Rettke thought she lost the set, and she was yelling at the line judge. I had never seen her so animated. So I thought there was fire there, but maybe the formations, they moved Devin Robinson to the middle in that second match, and Wisconsin looked a little bit more natural sweeping Rutgers, as you would expect they might. But let's go ahead. Let's jump into it. Mick and I are recording this one a little bit earlier. We usually record Monday afternoons. We're recording this Monday morning. So we just got a little sneak peek at the poll. We are going to reveal it with you. We're going to look at this. Our first reactions are your first reactions here, looking at it with Texas staying put at number 1. We did not jinx Yosia. Thank goodness, because she was a fantastic interview. So we're looking forward to having her on later in the season. But also, Texas did not play anyone in the conference last weekend. They had the Rice match that they looked great at, that we already talked to Nalani about. And then here we go. Look at this 2, 3, 4, 5. An unbelievable shakeup with Pittsburgh jumping over Louisville, something that Panther fans have been clamoring for the last few weeks. Louisville at 3, Purdue into the top 5 for the first time ever. They sit at 4 with that miraculous come from behind win against Ohio State. And then you've got Wisconsin at 5. What are your first reactions?
Well, the ACC has sure kicked it up. I mean, we expect to see the Big Ten in there. We expect to see some Pac-10, Big 12 with Texas and Baylor, but two ACC teams at 2 and 3, that's pretty phenomenal. And I think well earned though. I have no problem with that top 5. I had the same top 5. I looked at top 20 wins and bad losses. And I think the coaches are doing a pretty good job here. They're pretty close.
Yeah, I think they're starting to play a little bit more attention, right? You didn't keep Wisconsin up there because of a loss. Nebraska's fallen out of the top 10. They are not looking as consistent, and Krause really stepped up big for them. We'll talk about the Huskers in a minute, but a little bit more about that Purdue-Ohio State match. Kylie Murr, we talked to her. We love her tenaciousness. I thought she went up and down a little bit in that match. Of course, that 5th set, you've got to go watch it. I'm sure it's available on YouTube. These streamers and pirators love to rip the match and put it on YouTube for free for everyone right away. But there was that huge challenge, right? At 5-4 in that 5th set, Dave Shondell took a risk, not someone who loves to challenge a lot. They got the turnaround. Instead of 5-4 Ohio State, it was 5-4 Purdue. And then what they do best, right, Mick? It's blocking. For Purdue, they have JL Johnson. She started as a backup. She's worked her way up and then making that move, right? We saw so much of Taylor Trammell last year. Now it's the freshman Raven Colvin who picked up big blocks late. Ohio State, they got a little bit of a wake-up call this weekend. Penn State rammed them on Sunday, and maybe a little bit of a righteousness in the conference from a darling that has been getting a lot of headlines here in the pre-conference. Penn State was like, all right, child, let's take a step back here and remember who the big dogs are.
Critical thing, Daniel, in the Purdue match with Ohio State, Londa had 5-point errors in the 5th set.
Yep.
I mean, by herself, she doesn't many times make 5-point errors in a match. And in the 5th set, she had 4 hitting errors and I believe a serving error or something. I counted 5, and that's what helped Purdue really get over the hump there. I thought she would come back against Penn State and really dominate, yet she couldn't do that. She still was struggling a little bit. So some of the best players in the country have had trouble continuing week after week to dominate. So it's pretty interesting to watch these kids play.
And you mentioned the Penn State one. They did squander a set point early in that one. Ohio State did, so they were just unable to really put away big points. Same thing in the 4th set against Purdue, right? You saw opportunities for the Buckeyes. Then the Boilermakers in what was lined up to maybe be one of those letdown matches against an Indiana team that has looked a little fiery. And for the 3rd time in a row in that Mo Nunn Spike match, Purdue held IU under 100 hitting percentage. So that's just showing that the Boilermakers have their sights set on possibly reaching their first Final Four ever. So that could be something to keep an eye on there. Of course, we talked about all those teams near Columbus. Lafayette's not too far away. Talking more about this top 10, you see Minnesota, they survived a 5-setter against Michigan and then took care of a Maryland team that just ran out of steam, right? You have this emotional win against Wisconsin. It stinks to have to do this back-to-back flight. And I asked some of the liberos about this, that, the schedule with the Big Ten, Mick, forces you to fly to Wisconsin on a Thursday, play them on Friday. You've got this emotional win. It's 2 a.m. You're landing in Minneapolis. Then you have to play at one of the toughest places at the PAV, and they just didn't have the they just didn't have the steam, I think. And so Minnesota stays in the top 10. Go ahead.
Let me ask you a question. Who's the go-to for Wisconsin?
It's got to be, I think it's got to be Retke, but it looks like Loberg right now.
Well, they can't get Retke the ball enough.
Right.
All right. And their outsides are not scoring. Loberg didn't score.
I know. And they moved Devin Robinson to the middle on Sunday, and she looked comfortable. I wouldn't mind seeing that. It was a little bit of what Grace Cleveland did a few years ago with Purdue.
Yeah. I think Wisconsin's got a problem, and we need to watch.
And they switched liberos on Sunday. So it wasn't
that
Barnes.
Was interesting too.
It was
My
Georgia.
wife picked up on that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was interesting to see. So we'll have plenty of time to talk more about, how the Big 12 and the Big 10 are going to wrap up. But there wasn't too much notable in the Big 12 this weekend. Let's talk 10 to 20 here. And the standout is going to be Washington, right? Falling from 6 to 13. They lost at Utah. And then what was what, the set of the decade, the set of the century, the most incredible thing.
I've never seen one like this, honestly.
It's all right. So for those that may not have been on social media this weekend, we've got the highlight of the final point of this fourth set. Washington State at home has fallen out of the top 25. They're facing a Washington team who has to be upset that they just blew a come from behind win against from Utah, and then it goes the distance, right? It's 25-24, 26 all, 28 all, 30 all. But that 30 all point should have been match point, and yet a late touch changes it and gives it to Washington. Then they go 32 all, 34 all, 36 all, 40 all, 42 all, 44 all. And Mick, this is, I mean, how many times can you set Dressel? And how many times can you set Timmer? And Pia Timmer finishes with 31 kills, 21 digs, 7 blocks, all, smashing her former career highs. She gets 12 more kills than her previous career high. And Washington State loses the fourth set. They force a fifth, and we see the upset against the Huskies go down, and Washington State takes it in 5. It was incredible.
Yeah, that's one of the most incredible matches I watched. And one of the things, I watched the coaches because there were 9 serving errors in that fourth set.
And every single point, almost every point, I should say, is a set or a match point. So 12 match points Washington State had in that fourth set.
And there were 9 serving errors there back and forth. And the coaches were so good not to overreact. But I have a philosophy about serving errors. Coaches are calling serves. Players have to be free to not have to think they have to aim a ball someplace. I think the strategy probably should have been hit your best serve, you choose at that point, but back-to-back errors. In one case, 3 errors in a row. That's
they're contagious. They are contagious, Mick.
Yeah, and those kids were not. They were trying, but I've never seen anything like it. And I thought they stayed with it. They didn't get soft. They kept driving the ball over the net, and I thought that was pretty good. I just felt bad that we had that many serving errors. And then one other thing bothered me more than anything, and I actually texted the officials supervisor. There was a challenge that lasted over 5 minutes.
Yeah, now look, unacceptable.
Yeah, and if it takes that long to see if you can find a touch, don't you think the call should just stand? Because that really bothered me. I mean, you either see it or you don't. Sometimes you got to go through some film a little bit, but I really had a problem with that. And I spoke up, wasn't appreciated much, but I just think 2 minutes is more than enough time to make that call.
So now Washington State has beaten Washington 4 straight times after going 1-17 in their previous 18. So talk about a rivalry reversed. That was a fun one. Penn State moves up to 14. They were sitting at 20, so a big bump to see them sweep Ohio State on Sunday. UCLA pulls off the reverse sweep. I'm not sure anyone could even see it because of how late that was delayed, right? I mean, you had to watch it on like the Pac-12 app while that Washington State marathon was going on. But Stanford looked to have a comfortable 2-0 lead at home in Maples. UCLA storms back. They jump up from 19 to 15 while Stanford falls from 14 to 17. Utah from 15 to 19 as we reveal our final 5 teams here. And the big one for me, I am truly shocked that Florida is still ranked. They survive a 5-setter on Thursday against a Mississippi State team that is going to be in the bottom half of the SEC. They had lost 4 straight earlier in the season, and then they lose a 5-setter the next day to Mississippi State. Florida clinging on by a thread here at 22. And the SEC, right, is it up for grabs?
Maybe, but Florida may have some chemistry issues. I watched them play. They tipped match point into the net and on a good set. So I'm not sure what's going on there. I think they've got to straighten some things out. I think the coaches feel like the talent is there, so they keep them on the pole, but they don't appreciate the last 2 losses. I'm sure that's what's got them down there. And honestly, I would have Nebraska lower. Dan, they're at 12. They're getting that on their talent. But if you listen to John Cook's interview this week. He's saying that they're playing everybody. They're trying to figure out the lineups. So we shouldn't rank them high until they play at that level. I mean, it's not that we don't appreciate Nebraska, but we should rank them where they're playing, and they're playing about 18th or 19th in that. And Penn State's actually playing better than Nebraska right now.
No doubt about it. Losing a set at Northwestern, if you're Nebraska, is just one of those things that you don't do, right? You're surprised to see that. They then swept Iowa, so an easy walk into the conference for the Huskers. But like I said, Krause, the one that really stood out in the opening weekend for them. They get Michigan and Michigan State, so maybe a test in Lincoln though, and then at Penn State next weekend. So that could be the first real test for Nebraska. My big surprise here in this 20 to 25 range is Colorado not moving. You've got to give a little bit of credit. Yes, they got swept on Wednesday at Washington State, a team that the coaches have to realize are maybe a little bit better than they played in pre-conference, right? They just took down Washington. And then Colorado sweeps Utah, a team that won at Devaney and at Seattle, and now they're going to stay put at 24. That one had me a little puzzled.
I watched Drew's for Utah, and she's getting so many sets that I think she needs to stay in bed Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of each week and rest up. She just looks drained, and that kid is giving her all on every ball, but she's making some unforced errors, some things that she doesn't normally done, and I have done, and I think it's because she's trying to carry that team. She and Maddie Robinson and the right side have been really good as the point scorers, but they can't win if those three don't bring it. And that's a lot of pressure on those three kids.
It's going to be a bloodbath, in my opinion. The Pac-12 is not going to be a conference that has anyone running away. That might be the most fun conference to follow. Obviously, the Big Ten is going to be a blast. We're going to give a little bit of love to some of our mid-majors here, but going through our segments here at the end, upset of the week, got to be Maryland, right, over Wisconsin. I didn't even put up a poll because it was a runaway upset of the year. Number 2, Wisconsin, a team that went undefeated in conference play last season, loses their opener. Here are a couple wild ones, though, right? Of course, we have that marathon set that steals all the headlines, but there were some crazy results in 2 conferences that always have crazy results, right? We love MACtion, the MAC conference. How about 9-3 Toledo getting swept by 0-11 Ohio to start their conference season? That one was an eye-opener. And then new to the SWAC, FAMU has a great start to their season. Florida A&M, they're swept by 0-10 Jackson State. That one was an eye-opener. And then you and I each have been wrong about one team this season. For you, it was LSU. For me, it was Wright State, because the 2-time Horizon champs lost a 5-set, come from behind. They were down 2-0 and down 5-0 in the 5th to Northern Kentucky. Northern Kentucky goes on a 3-0 run to win that 5th set. So that one was a bit of a tough one to swallow, I'm sure, for them. Comeback of the weekend goes to Kent State. Ball State, these are the boys. I mean, come on. The Cardinals are having such a strong start to the year. We're waiting for them to finally step up in conference play, and they're up 2-0 and leading in the 5th. Kent State wins 17-15 in that 5th set. And then wrapping up our segments here before we have one more segment here at the end. One of our firsts, Cal State Bakersfield, new to the Big West, beats Long Beach State for the first time in their school's history. Long Beach State,
know that.
Yeah, Long Beach State had a tough weekend. They were swept by Cal Poly on Friday.
Oh my.
Cal Poly, 2-0, come from behind win, a 5-set win against Fullerton. So that was our first of the weekend.
Let me throw in.
Go ahead.
Let me throw in Ohio. You talked about Ohio's win. Jeff Carlson's back at Ohio. He was the coach at Ohio State for many years, and he won. He was at Ohio before he went to Ohio State. He won at Ohio, and he made that program really good. And they've got a libero by the name of Sam Steele, a Nebraska kid that's playing for them. They're going to be heard from before the end of the season. Carlson's a good coach, and he'll get the most out of those kids. So watch out, Mac. You've got an Ohio team that's coming.
Okay, and then we're going to wrap this episode up with a couple impressions, right? Give me your 5 impressions from the opening weekend of conference play, maybe tailing back from a couple of the weekends in non-conference. You've been kind of harboring this and you didn't want any overreaction. So now we've had enough time for these opinions to distill and turn into fine whiskey here. So give them to us.
Okay, we've enjoyed the scheduling, right? We've had a heck of a good time, and I think all the spectators have. I think that if you're going to play top 20 teams, you're going to play more than 2 in the first 4 weeks. You shouldn't schedule probably more than 8 matches, and you should spread them out. I love the fact that the top teams are playing each other. And that's good for volleyball. It's good for the spectators. It's really a dynamic start this year to the collegiate season. But spread them out so your kids can recover and play at their top every time. Second thing, practice time. I wonder how much we should be practicing at this point. I'm not so sure we shouldn't be lobbying for 4 weeks pre-start of the season for practice and then start the season. So we have 4 weeks before conference. It's just a thought. The other thing, as I already mentioned, defense wins early because it forces the other team into unforced errors. And as long as you can keep your unforced errors and down and you play defense, you're in all of the games. That's what seems to be happening everywhere.
My favorite thing is when coaches, you'll ask them the key to the game. And just like this, Mick, I mean, we got to win the serve pass battle. I mean, yes, right? Everyone at home is saying, yes, Mick, obviously defenses win the matches, right?
Well, obviously that's right. Except if you're watching, defense is not very good. I mean, we brought out the Libros, maybe 3 of the best. But we should start looking at the other kids who are playing well, the middle backs, maybe the setters, because there are some that are not bringing up a ball and there are some that are doing really, really well. And so when you start looking at that and then you look at the blocking, I think the blocking's been porous, but and I say porous, I mean the ball's been getting between the blockers, which means that maybe the systems are faster. So the backcourt defense has to even be better at this point. So that's one of the things that we should look at. And then coaches like to have their players get to the point where they don't have to think. We've seen an awful lot of thinking going on. Where teams have lost it is where they've come in on cruise control and didn't prepare properly. But teams that are wearing out maybe are being forced to analyze and think and a little bit too much here. I read an article that Jim Stone put out that said the teams play best when they have to make as few mental calculations as possible, and they can play the way they practice. So I just throw that out as for all of us who are watching the matches to see if we see any of that either way, and if that is a truism or is just something that I'm making up.
Okay. Those are solid observations. I think as we move forward, I want to keep an eye on a couple of those things. It's tough though, because our goal here, we don't want to have too many coaches. We don't want any coaches on our show, right? We want to keep this player centric, but I'd love to know that opinion of the practice schedule, because a lot of the fans don't really understand how much practice really goes into it. 2-a-days for 3 weeks leading up to the season. And then of course you've got practice throughout the year. And then when you go on the road, you practice at the arena the day before the match, or the night before the match. Sometimes I mentioned you fly into Wisconsin on a Thursday. Sometimes you do a walkthrough Thursday night. Then you practice Friday morning. Then you have the warm up for the match on Friday. So you mentioned the wear and tear, especially in this specific year, Mick, and we'll end it on this topic. This is a year where there was no off season, right? They just played a full season 5-6 months ago. So you have to imagine that the wear and tear on some of these players is going to be heavy. And we're seeing it on some of the ladies that they lean on the most, right? The Grace Cleveland, Caitlin Newton for Purdue, the Mia Grunzi for Ohio State, and obviously the Danny Drews and the Grace Loberg, and Dana Retke is getting so many swings. So it's something definitely to keep an eye on, Mick. I like that we kind of talked about this here at the end.
And we should keep an eye on Nebraska, who's rotating their players around. They have so much talent that they're rotating.
Not a bad idea, right? A little load management.
Yeah, so we need to watch to see where they are late October. That'll be a real
And
critical thing.
Lexi Sun not playing 6 rotations, Maddie Kubik not playing 6 rotations here recently. So that could be something where, hey, Husker fans, you may be up in arms, but it could really benefit you in December.
Or not.
Or not. The beauty of it, we don't know. We'll be back next week for another episode. As always, we do have a fantastic slate, but keep an eye on Twitter. We'll kind of tweet out our favorite matches of the weekend. No time for that here. But as always, he's Mick Haley. I'm Daniel Gilman, and this is 6 Rotations.